Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I want to leave a side note on that right now and say that this is actually the first time I'm saying that in the morning. So, my name is Jay Edgar, and I am here with a former entertainment journalist and a current YouTuber, Vanessa Buck. Vanessa, welcome to Ed's World.
Thank you. Most people probably still know me by my maiden name, Vanessa Berben. I'm at Two Fingers Bourbon on YouTube and Twitter. So I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I heard you over on Steven's show, and I really liked the way that you delivered your message. So, and I checked out some of your YouTube as well. So, I'm kind of excited to have you here.
I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun talking to Steven. That was a really good conversation I thought we had.
He's going to be coming on next week.
Awesome.
It'll be his second tour on this show. Before we get started, I just want to talk a bit about what's going on here with ICE and what's going on with the Democrats and ICE. And that's, for me, it's something that I'm kind of torn with the fact that people are telling ICE or the people that the ICE are going to be rating what their rights are. And that's because it comes down to the basic human rights of everything. Yes, everybody has these human rights, and that was what was laid out in our Constitution. If we are to take away the rights from people who are in the country illegally, then that means that our rights come from the government and they don't come from our creator. And I'm not very comfortable with that. So, I mean, I do want to have justice served to these people, but on the other side of that, they do have rights, and I want to make sure that they are handled. So, I don't know which side of that I actually fall on. I'm not talking about deportation, of course. I'm talking about Democrat politicians helping them make sure that they know what their rights are. Where do you fall on that?
I actually kind of fall very similarly where you are. It's something I'm conflicted about. Where do human rights end and constitutional rights begin?
Mm-hmm.
And do we apply constitutional rights to non-citizens? Which I think is probably sort of the crux of the debate right now: is are immigrants, are refugees, are asylum seekers, and more importantly, are the people who are none of those things and are just coming in illegally for economic advantages, do they get to be afforded the same constitutional laws as a natural born citizen or as an immigrant who came and went through the appropriate legal process? And that's where I don't know that they do. I think we all have, like you said, we all have fundamental human rights, afforded to us by our creator. And so that is something, everyone has a right to, life and freedom, but do they have the right to come over, ignore our laws and come in, avoid the legal process and still benefit from, government assistance, are they allowed to take part in the electoral process? That's where I don't know, and I don't know that I think that they should.
Well, the benefits and the electoral process is a hard no for me, but the freedom to speech, the freedom to have a warrant in order or to have due process, I should probably expand that further, and the freedom to have a lawyer. Those are rights I don't want to give to the government. I want those to be endowed by my creator.
I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
Well, with that, before we get started again, I do have a couple announcements to make. First off, it looks like I'm going to be starting a new series, and I'm going to release a solo video talking about this a little bit more in depth. Some of you have seen on Twitter the fact that I put the poll up, but I'm going to be doing another solo video every week. I don't know if it's going to be every week because there's going to be a lot of production into it. It might be every other week at this point, but we're going to have a civics review. I'm going to go down through the Constitution. I'm going to see what the founders intended us to have, what they laid out for us, and what the roles of government are, because it seems when I go on Twitter and when I go on YouTube, a lot of people on both sides have forgotten. So I'm going to take some time. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about what all of this actually means for us. So maybe that'll change a few minds. Maybe that'll let some people know what their rights are, what their rights aren't, and what actually is a basic human right. So look forward to that coming forward. Also, for those of you who are listening back, you heard that cool music starting in, and that was provided for me by one Stephen Ignoramus. So I want to give a lot of thanks to him. That was a good cut, and he gave me the permission to use it. So I hope everybody enjoys that. We've got a pretty full show to talk about today. Of course, we're going to talk about the Epstein case and what happened there, where it all started and where it all ends. As we always do on this show, we will be talking about 2020 and what's going on there. There's been a little bit of motion there, and some polls have changed a little bit. New York socialist Alexandra OcasioCortez started a feud with Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. It seems to be based in race, but we'll sit down and we'll talk about where this started and where it ends. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez again is in the news this week because of a conversation she had with, the Customs and Border Patrol director or the ICE director? I can't remember which one. But he sat down and he shut her down and set her down and showed her what the laws are, and now she's trying to retaliate about that. Nancy Pelosi's Twitter feed has become a repository for impeachment fever, and some of her tweets have become close to being ratioed because of that. We'll talk a bit about that. And out of my neck of the woods, since we talk so much about your neck of the woods on this show so often, the president visited Milwaukee. Now, there were some things leading up to that. Of course, the feud with Paul Ryan, and what this means for the fact that my state is a battleground, so we'll talk a bit about that. It is going to be all of this and more on Ed's World. Thanks for watching this show on YouTube and on BitChute. If you like what you see, why don't you go ahead and hit that like button. And if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe as well. If you are listening back to this on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, thank you again. Make sure you hit the subscribe. And if you are on iTunes, hit that 5-star rating and a good review. That helps us move up the charts. Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. We are glad to have our writers on staff, and we have some great shows on there. We have Stephen Ignoramus' show, which you have been on and I've been on as well. We've got The Generational Gap, and we have this show. Make sure you go over there and check that out. After a lengthy introduction, Vanessa, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. So like you had said, I was an entertainment journalist for many years. I mostly focused on television. So I've had some background with covering Donald Trump before. I ended up stumbling into politics. It was never my intention to cover the political world. I was always really happy, covering film, television, celebrities, things that aren't ultimately that important. But I stumbled onto the Walkaway campaign last year. After, coincidentally, we've been talking about ICE, we've been talking about immigration. I am mixed race. I'm half Hispanic. And after a very heated discussion with my mother, where she actually insulted my white side of my heritage because I spoke up thinking it was okay to do so, and I talked to her about immigration and how I support a border wall, and I don't support illegal immigration. You had this relationship where we could talk about anything, but that really struck a nerve with her, which I find confusing because she's the daughter of legal immigrants, and so it turned contentious, and I, right at the same time, stumbled onto Brandon Strzok's Walkaway video, and I got really inspired and decided to make one for myself. And it sort of struck right at the right time, and so it took off, and I started getting hundreds of thousands of views, lots of supportive comments, but also a lot of negative pushback. Some people were threatening me with violence. I had a few people threaten me with sexual assault. It got really vile sometimes for several months, and it rather than, I think, having the desired effect of silencing me, it really lit something in me and made me want to start focusing on politics the way I never had before. So at the time, I had actually, I guess, retired from journalism, and it really, reinstigated that part of my skill set, or that, desire to start learning more, having gone so many years really not that invested in politics, just automatically being a Democrat because I thought, I'm mixed race and we're all supposed to be Democrats. And so it catapulted me into something totally different that I've never done before. And I've been making videos ever since, mostly about politics. And I've really enjoyed it. And the negativity has fallen away a little bit, I think, as I've proven that I'm not going to allow that to dissuade me. I'm not going to be silenced. And so the support has been amazing. And so here I am now, just sort of approaching politics from someone who used to be very liberal, to the point of I would even say I was a social justice warrior. I was a leftist at one point. I do have friends that are in Antifa, friends that have started their own chapters of left-wing militia groups. And we do not speak very much at all anymore. But so someone who came from that world and is now approaching politics from a more independent viewpoint, I would say my views lean independent conservative, but I'm really shying away from labels and parties right now. I think both parties have a lot of room for improvement. And so I've just been having a lot of fun exploring that.
Both parties definitely have a lot of room for improvement. That's why I'm making the video series that I just mentioned before. You kind of answered both of my initial guest questions in one fell swoop, but as an entertainment journalist, I do have to ask: Have you met any interesting celebrities? Did you get, or were you afforded that opportunity?
So because I'm based in DC, most of my work was done over the phone.
Okay.
But I have gotten to speak to some pretty fun people. My wheelhouse was actually horror. So I've gotten to speak with a few of the people behind The Walking Dead. To be honest, I'm hesitant to name drop people
That's
because
understandable.
I'm worried that because of my politics now, I often get targeted by people on the far left. And so the people that I've spoken to in the past, at the time I was also on the left, they have gone further left, and I wouldn't want them to get targeted because of who I am now. But I've had the opportunity to speak to Glenn Mazzara and one of a woman that I admire quite a bit, Gail Ann Hurd. For me, and this is me nerding out right now, but for me, the biggest interview I've ever done, I got to actually speak for quite some time with Brian Froud, who was the artistic director behind The Dark Crystal and The Labyrinth.
Oh,
And
wow.
so if you're not in that, realm or genre, it may not be, a big deal to you, but it was the interview of my career. And I was just honored that he would speak to me, and we had a fantastic conversation, and we talked a lot about The Dark Crystal. And so that still, I hold on to that interview as like probably some of the best work I ever got to do. So there were others, but I don't want to risk anybody getting, singled out because they dared to talk to a conservative at one point in their life.
No, I understand that entirely. There's actually a Twitch streamer that I talk to from time to time. I watch his streams, and the voice that he has and the way that he presents things, I would love to get him on this show, but I know that would probably be a death sentence to his Twitch streams. So I've never approached him for this exact same reason, because some of us get up there, and then everyone knows who we are, and then they go after everybody that we've ever interviewed. So
Yeah, I definitely have those concerns. Back when my first political video, the walkaway video, went viral, I had a lot of people trying to figure out where I worked, who I'd spoken to in the past. It's died down a lot, and as I sort of alluded to a minute ago, the people that I've spoken to, they have nothing to do with me now. Both Glenn and Gail have unfollowed me on social media. They've disassociated. So if anyone's thinking that they should go after them, they've already separated from me. So there's no need to criticize them in any way. And I don't have any ill will towards them for doing that. People drink that Kool-Aid, and they follow the herd mentality. So it's understandable.
Well, if you're satisfied with that, I think it's time to go talk about somebody else who had a great amount of influence in the Hollywood and especially the political sphere. Epstein.
Yes.
How much have you seen about that so far?
I've been following that very closely because of my past in entertainment and his connections. It's concerning. I do want to say in some people's defense, particularly with Trump, and we're seeing his connections with Epstein get brought up a lot. I don't think that we can necessarily blame everyone for having once met him or had a conversation with him. He was prolific around the New York socialite celebrity scene. So I think it's fair to say that anyone who had a presence in the 90s, in the early aughts, anyone who was a notable person in New York at that time has probably interacted with Epstein, and they may not know what he was up to, or maybe it was a rumor. At the same time, I also, it's a confliction because I think that they all probably heard rumors. They all probably were aware something was going on that was inappropriate. So I think it is fair to ask yourself, how culpable are these people in what happened? And so I don't blame anyone for questioning it, but I do think we should also be willing to give some people the benefit of the doubt.
Interesting. Well, just so the audience is completely caught up with everything, because we kind of jumped the gun a little bit on the topic on this one, but New York socialite Jerry Epstein was arrested this past, it was 2 weeks ago almost at this point, on several counts of child prostitution, child rape, and just a bevy of other things. And the conversation has always been, first off, how does this implicate some of the people, especially in the political sphere, that have been associated with the man, maybe including our president? That name has been brought up completely. And of course, what does this mean for Epstein going forward? Is he going to see the inside of a jail cell, or is this going to be like the last time he got arrested? And mysteriously, of course, Labor Secretary Alex Acosta has been wrapped up in this as well. So you probably paid a bit more attention to this than I do. What actually happened?
Oh wow. So the issue is that Acosta was a part of that plea deal, or that deal that Epstein got, and it meant that for all these counts he had of child prostitution, possession of child pornography, he only served 13 months, and it was a work release program. He was actually out, I believe, 16 hours a day for 6 days a week. And from what I've also read, when he was in jail, he was kept apart from the general population. He kept to himself. So he was still, what I think is most alarming, what we're learning, is that while he was incarcerated and while he was, supposedly being watched by the government, he was still engaging in all these same activities. So he was still doing this outside, in his office, in, I believe, his whatever apartments he had at the time. And what also people are starting, I think the bigger question is, where did he get his money and how did he become wealthy. He supposedly was in finance, but people who have been in the same industry have said that they have never done deals with him. They've never interacted with him on a business standpoint. So there are a lot of people that are starting to wonder now, how did he accumulate so much wealth? And I think that is what we're going to see the biggest spotlight put on, if one is put on it at all, because we have a lot of people that have industries to protect, reputations to protect. So it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what comes out from this.
Yeah, and one of the most curious things that I have been wondering about this all time is, like you said, he wasn't really that big of a player at the beginning, but all of a sudden he's a billionaire, and it seems to be tied to the fact that he has connections with people like Bill Clinton.
Absolutely, and the rumor, and it's important we stipulate it's all rumor, it's all conjecture right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the thought was, he went from he doesn't have a degree, and he somehow was able to get a math teaching position at a prestigious school in New York. So how did he get that job? And it was that job that then gave him a foothold into that world. And as you said, suddenly overnight he's a billionaire. So where did his money come from, and how did he get it? And the prevailing rumor or suspicion is that he may have been involved in blackmail. He may have, because of his proclivities towards younger women and his social status, he was able to bring people into that web with him. And was he able to capture things on film or video that could incriminate the people he was working with? And so is that where his money actually comes from?
Yeah, and a lot of people keep talking about this safe that's in his office, that the office that only a housekeeper was allowed to go into from time to time and nobody else was allowed into. People are saying that that's where the videos are, that's where the transactions are, which the transactions are somewhere else because the pilot on the Lolita Express has expressly implicated former President Bill Clinton, which may be partially the reason why this story has gone so quiet so quickly. I don't know if you've noticed that or not.
I have, and I give a lot of credit to alternative media and independent journalists that are keeping this story, in the forefront, because they are going to try very hard to sweep this under the rug, and they're going to hope that we forget about it. And so I think we're going to see a lot more political theater like we are right now. We're going to see a lot of distraction tactics going on that we may not realize that's what they are, but that's what they are. And I think the Democrats are going to do whatever they can, because Clinton has been very heavily implicated in this. There's photos of him on the plane. There's photos of him arm in arm with one of the women who is suspected of being one of his handlers, who helped recruit other young women into this, horrible world of trafficking and prostitution. And so he's got a lot that he's going to have to answer for. And right now he's not. He released a statement denying, any close involvement, lying allegedly about how many times he was on the plane, when, as you mentioned, the flight logs show something different. So they're going to do whatever they can to keep this, out of our immediate, consciousness.
I do want to issue a quick correction before I move on in this topic, but I said at the beginning of the segment that it is Jerry Epstein. It is Jeffrey Epstein. So apologize for that. One of the things that was brought almost completely to the, or not completely, but brought to the forefront almost immediately was the fact that Epstein somehow implicated Trump as well, and this was supposed to be the smoking gun that was going to get him out of office before the 2020 election. So, of course, there was blowback as well, and people are saying that Trump tried to get him shut down. Trump threw him out of Mar-a-Lago. Do you think this implicates Trump at all anywhere?
I don't know. I think it's fair to ask, but I also think that Trump has shown that whatever he may have thought of Epstein in the past, 15 years ago, he is on record saying positive things about him. He called him a terrific guy. However, he's also, yes, he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago for, there's conflicting stories. Epstein either hit on or actually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. And so he was banned from the club for that. And I think the most important thing is that, oh, hold on, my dogs are barking. Sorry about that. I have very barky dogs, and we live in a city. I think the most important thing that speaks of Trump's character is that one of the lawyers that is representing the girls, he was being interviewed, and he stated that in 2009, he subpoenaed several people involved, and that Trump was the only person who actually contacted him on his own and was completely forthcoming in information he provided about Epstein. The lawyer said that Trump had really good info on him, and it proved to be instrumental to their case. And he did this without a court order. And I think that's probably the most positive thing in Trump's favor, is that he was the only person in that world that stepped up and said something. And it may be because he was the only one with enough power, enough clout, enough money to be able to do so without, facing repercussions from that scene. But to me, that's the thing that gives me the most hope that he isn't involved in this the way that Clinton apparently might be.
It's interesting too. I mean, once this was something that could have taken down Trump, it was in the news, front and center. Everybody saw it every day. And then once it came to the point where, like you said, it maybe didn't implicate him, maybe it was going to be too much of a stretch to get Trump involved with this. And once Bill Clinton was heavily involved with this, it came out of the news. So one of the things that I have to question now that you brought that up too with Mar-a-Lago is, I mean, if this was an assault and we don't know this yet at all, why weren't the police involved then?
I totally agree with you on that. And that's part of, I think, why it's okay to question this and it's okay to be concerned. I think a lot of Republicans fall into the habit of defending Trump no matter what. And I don't think that that's completely honest. I don't think that that's really being fair to the political process that we hope to have in this country. We should be able to question this, and he should answer for it. As I said, it's conflicted. I've read different articles. Some reporters are saying that he merely was caught hitting on the daughter of an employee there, and others have described it as an assault. And so I think part of that could be, and not to, I'm not saying this to go on a completely different tangent, but we are in the Me Too era where, in some places, looking at a woman is called assault.
Oh, yeah.
Hitting on a woman. Yeah, hitting on a woman is considered sexual assault. So I could see how hitting on a 14-year-old girl could be described as sexual assault. So we don't really know yet exactly what happened. And I think that Trump would be really, it would behoove him to say something and be completely open, more so than he has so far. Even though by all accounts he's been very open about it, I think it would be really beneficial to him if he were to just come out and, lay everything on the table. This is what happened. This is, and if there are things he regrets about it, to say that, I wish I'd handled this differently. I wish I'd contacted the authorities. And I think that would win him a lot of points with people that are in the center, or independents.
Well, speaking of people in the center and people who are independents and people who are going to be in play in the next couple of years here, let's go ahead and talk about 2020.
Enough!
Apparently somebody else in your household wants to talk about 2022.
They are fired up right now.
That's okay. We love dogs in this household, so. 2020 has become an interesting topic. It's become a regular topic on this show, and there's been some motion in the 2020 race as well. When we had Wyatt on last week, we talked about the fact that Eric Swalwell had gotten out of the race, and as I was waking up the next morning to post the video and audio from the podcast, we found out that Tom Steyer decided that he was going to jump into the race in Eric Swalwell's place. Now, I didn't know at all who Tom Steyer was, except for the fact that he had a bunch of money, and he tried to rally to get Trump impeached. So, do you know anything more about Tom Steyer?
That's about what I know. I'll say this, and I cannot find the article now, and I wish that I could, but there are rumors that apparently there is some sort of law or rule that if you're running for president, you can't be investigated. And so there is so there's some gossip that is it that he's really running because he might be under threat of an investigation that we're not aware of. I don't know. Like I said, I can't find, possibly whoever wrote that article decided to delete it. But that was the rumor that I had heard about it. So to be totally, open about the things I've heard, that was the rumor I stumbled on. But I really didn't know who he was other than, he's very active in the impeachment push. And to be honest, the announcement to run doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. We're in 2019, and yet it's considered late in the game right now. And he's certainly going to be able to get enough fundraising to qualify, but I don't believe he can get enough votes to actually get himself into a debate at this point.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because he's jumping in after the first debate, which didn't Trump do that too? Wasn't he after the first debate? I thought he was.
Possibly, but did that debate really do anything? that debate was just a total mess.
Which one? The first one for the Republicans, or this past one we just had?
These recent Democratic debates. I have no idea what that solved, other than showing that all of them would, support health benefits for illegal immigrants, which I don't agree with.
Well, we got rid of the nuclear representative, so maybe it did have some.
That's we got rid of the guy that wanted to nuke us to take our guns away. So that's a win.
Well, speaking of the debate, and that's a great transition there, one of the other big stories that I've been hearing for the last few weeks now, and this is something that I kind of predicted back in February, I think, is when I talked about postal banking, because that was the same week that this happened. Elizabeth Warren has been rising in the polls very steadily, and she's coming up. I think she's in some polls she's in second, and in other polls she's tied for second with Harris and Sanders. So I predicted right away when I started. I listen to Pod Save America every once in a while, and those are two former Obama staffers that put on that show. Back in February, they were talking about how important it was that we made sure that we got Elizabeth Warren to the top and everybody got out to support her. And yet, I don't know anybody on the ground that actually likes Elizabeth Warren at all either way. But I've predicted that the DNC is going to do whatever it takes to get her to the top for one reason or the other. And I kind of hope that they do, just for the entertainment value. What are your thoughts on Warren?
I feel the same. I hope that she gets to the top. I could see her and Harris being on the Democratic ticket in 2020, and that bodes very well for Republicans. I personally do not believe that any candidate that's advocating for reparations is going to win. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it's the surefire way to alienate all of the people that you're hoping are going to vote for you. I think the biggest thing right now with these 2020 candidates, they're all appealing to the far left. Mm-hmm. And the far left, while very vocal, is actually physically very small. So if all you're going to do is appeal to leftists and far left politics, you're going to be driving away all the moderates, all the independents, all the centrists, all the people who are thinking logically and understanding that reparations is not something that is going to work right now. It's just simply not going to happen. There are far too many people that are so removed from slavery that they are never going to back the idea that they should be held financially responsible for something they had absolutely nothing to do with. So I think that is a dying battle. I think it's the hill that a lot of them are going to die on. And if that's the platform they want to take, more power to them, because it's going to secure a victory for Republicans.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up middle America and the middle Democrats as well, because yes, this entire crop of Democrats, with the exception of Yang for the most part and Tulsi Gabbard, is trying to reach across to that far, far progressive sentiment. And to be completely honest, you probably see a lot of far left progressivism in DC down there. I am in the middle of the Rust Belt, and I come from a union house. I say that all the time on this show. I was talking to my mother at some point, and this is somebody who said to me once, when I was first kind of coming across the aisle during the Obama years, or immediately prior to the Obama years, my mom said that, well, if you're going to vote for a Republican, maybe you shouldn't go out and do your civic duty. And she's standing back now talking about how they can't, her and Dad cannot stand Elizabeth Warren.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to see her. And I think that's a sentiment that's reflected all across the Rust Belt, at least on the working side, with the boomers and the Gen Xers and the people who are going to be working for unions and doing other production that have been Democrats for their entire lives. That might push some more of them off of the ticket. I know Hillary pushed a lot of these Democrats off of the Democrat side of the ticket. I think Warren's going to put the final axe into there.
I definitely agree. I think Warren and Harris, particularly, as well as Sanders, are doing their best to alienate as many people as possible, and it's a very dumb strategy to have. And as I said, the far left is incredibly vocal, and when you live in a far left bubble, as I do, it's very easy to convince yourself that they're the majority, because around you they are. That's the world that I live in. Almost every other house has a pride flag, a Black Lives Matter sign, no matter where you come from, you're our neighbor sign in 50 million different languages. And they are completely disassociated from the rest of the country. It's New York, DC, California, and that is the biggest grouping of this mindset. And they have they're so wrapped up in their bubbles and their echo chambers that they do not realize or understand that they are a very small minority. And I understand how they could convince themselves of that, because where I am, it's everywhere. You can't escape politics here, and you can't escape far left politics here. You can't even be a conservative. You can't be a vocal conservative in DC. You're allowed to be, when you meet someone who's conservative, they'll immediately tell you I'm fiscally conservative. And then immediately jump into how much they love, LGBT. They support Black Lives Matter. They support 8-year-olds being trans. And so there's this stifling of conservative thought here, and it's allowing them to convince themselves that they are somehow a majority when they're not.
You keep bringing up Harris, and I want to talk a bit about her and Joe Biden, because he is still struggling so hard with this. And he went on an apology tour to talk about what had happened when he got up on stage with Kamala Harris, and he got slapped down for the fact that he was not in support of forced busing. And does he recover from that?
I don't think that he will, but even if he does, he still has a lot of other things that should be giving people concern. I used to support Biden. I used to like him. I wanted him to run in 2016. That was before I had seen the mountains of photo and video evidence of how inappropriate he can be with children. to me, that's more concerning than his views on busing. So right now, I almost wonder, is the busing issue another diversion tactic so that we're not focusing on, to me, the far more concerning issue of I believe he inappropriately interacts with children. And that's my opinion. I don't, I'll stipulate that, but from what I've seen, it makes me uncomfortable. So even if he overcomes this latest, kerfluffle with Harris, he's still going to have to answer to that. And I think he's sort of kicking that football down the field right now. But if he manages to come out on top, Trump is going to have a field day with that, because whatever you want to say about Trump, I know there's a lot of, talk about him and inappropriate relationships with women. It's with women. It's with adult women that he hits on and that he, says things to. I think there's one joke from his past that he made about a girl where there's that anecdote that he was passing by a very young girl who was a very pretty little girl, and he made a joke that, in 10 years you might be my girlfriend. So even there in the joke, he's saying, that you are a child, and decade from now when you're an adult, that's when I'll actually be looking at you in that way. So he's clearly, he doesn't have that to deal with. And so if he manages to get a hold of Biden, he is going to mop the floor with him. Biden is not a good candidate, but sadly, he might be one of the best candidates they have. They really don't have any good candidates other than, you mentioned Yang and Gabbard. Those are really the only two that could stand up to Trump at all and have any kind of popularity with moderate centrist independents. And those are the two that they're pushing out. So it sucks for them. It benefits me quite a bit, but I just they don't get it, and they don't get that Trump is going to chew them up.
And the thing with Biden too, like you had said that you liked him in the past. In 2008, I didn't like Obama. I had read all of his policies, and I legitimately said this is going to push us to a redistributionist state. As little as I was into politics then, I understood economics and I understood where that was going. On the day that I went in to vote for the president in 2008, I wasn't quite to the right yet, but I struggled with myself. Do I leave the top of the ticket blank, or do I write Biden in? Because he was the union-friendly kind of guy that wasn't going to be like Barack was.
Yeah, I wish I could say the same. I voted for Obama both times. Thought I was doing the right thing. I was still completely entrenched in social justice and thinking that everyone is oppressed and white man bad. And so it wasn't until actually after Trump won the election that I really started to dig more into Obama's history and some of the decisions he made and how destructive he really was as a president. So I would agree, on that alone, I think Biden should be cause for concern just because of his close ties to Obama. That I think that as we go along in history, we're going to keep learning just how destructive Obama's presidency really was.
Oh, you just provide the best transitions for me every time, because the last thing before I go into my regular 2020 questions I want to touch on is another Biden story, and this involves him and Barack Obama, because Joe Biden was put on record this week as saying that the Russian interference would have never happened under his and Barack's watch. And I heard him say that. I was listening to the Ben Shapiro. I was listening to the Ben Shapiro show actually when I heard him say it. He used a clip from that, and the first thing that I said out loud when I heard that was, "You own a calendar, right?"
Right. But it did happen.
It didn't happen, but if if we go to the assumption that it did happen, yes, it would have happened under their watch. I'm still in the
Absolutely.
camp that it didn't happen, but at all. Yeah, that's
Well, I think honestly, I think it's naive to think that foreign countries don't try to meddle in our elections. America does its darndest to try to meddle in the elections of other countries. I look at that as something that is natural between, every country is going to try to get the candidate of their choice to be in power in a country they're either at odds with or a country that they're friends with. So that to me isn't surprising. But I think it should be expected. That doesn't mean it should be supported. That doesn't mean that it should be allowed. But I don't think it should be surprising. And so if it did happen, you're absolutely right. It happened while Obama and Biden were in office. And it happened, allegedly because of Clinton and because of her own machinations and her own potentially payments. So this was all under his watch. I think Biden is really hoping that we're going to ignore reality, and right, that none of us have a calendar.
all right. When I close out this segment, I have 3 questions I always ask the guest because I think it's interesting for the listener to see how this changes as we go from week to week and how each of my different guests view these same 3 questions. So, the first question, these all involve who's going to be at the end on 2020. The first question is based solely on the statistics that we have for the week. Who do you think is the Democrat nominee based on what we're seeing and the trends that we're seeing?
I think we're going to see, like I mentioned before, I think it's going to be Harris. I think Harris is actually going to get the nomination, and it's going to be a matter of who's her running mate. And right now, I think it's a toss-up between Warren and possibly Sanders, but I think Sanders is too male, so it's going to end up being Warren.
Okay. My next question, of course, is if something should happen to Donald Trump to the point that he can't be the president and we have to have a Democrat the next time around, who on the field does Vanessa want to see be the president in 2020?
Oh man.
Has to be a Democrat.
I don't know of any Democrat that I could support right now. I like some of Tulsi Gabbard's thoughts, but I also don't like her position on guns. She supports, I believe she supports, stricter gun laws,
Mm-hmm.
and she supports an assault weapons ban. So I might lean towards her. I really enjoy Andrew Yang. However, the universal basic income policy that he pushes, I don't believe is feasible or sustainable in any way. Those would probably be the two that I would say I might be able to find myself supporting. But I think they would also need to come around on some of their more ridiculous ideas for me to really totally get behind them.
I know, it's a fun lesser of 25 evils question.
It really is. Maybe we'll go with Williamson. What's the mystical
Marianne Williamson.
Yes, I'll say Marianne Williamson. I can get behind the mysticism of being your own light and leading with love. We'll go with she might be another one that I could throw my hat into with.
And the last question involves the debates between Trump and whoever his potential nominee is. So, no statistics, no who you would rather be as or see as president. For the pure entertainment value, who do you want to see debating Donald Trump in 2020?
So I'll be honest, I would rather see him debate a man, because I think if he goes after a woman, because no matter who it is, he's going to chew them up and spit them out. But if it's a woman, he's going to get even more, he's going to be called a sexist even more than he is right now. So in that respect, I would probably rather see Biden or Sanders go up against him, because that way Trump can just go full throttle, troller in chief, and completely annihilate them and be able to do so without any fear of backlash. So those would be my two that I would really love to see him against. I'd particularly love to see him go against Biden, because I think Biden's got a horrible track record, a horrible personal track record, whereas with Sanders, it's his policies, it's, his ties to socialism. And so he's sort of a nice guy. And there's not a whole lot that Trump's going to be able to sink his teeth into in that respect, whereas Biden has a lot of issues. And so Trump is going to have a field day with those. I would really love to see that.
Well, I don't think that they're actually going to debate if Trump and Biden get together. I think Biden's just going to take him back behind the gym.
That's true. Either the gym or the woodshed, and rough him up a little bit. Yeah, he's fond of saying that, which is indicative of Democrats right now. The far left really loves violent tactics at this point.
Let's talk about this Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Pelosi feud that sprung up this past week, because this kind of shows some of the fissures in the Democrat Party and what's going to turn around and come about when we look into 2020. This is going to be a pivotal moment in our 2020 race, I think. So Nancy Pelosi called a closed-door meeting with several of the younger members of the House. Now, we don't know exactly what went on in this meeting. Of course, we can see what everybody else tweeted about this meeting, but for the most part, Nancy Pelosi said, "Do not tweet about your fellow representatives, especially if they're Democrats. If you have a problem, come to me." And now these four women, who are Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley, who I had not heard about before this, they're all accusing Nancy Pelosi of being a racist and doing so very, very publicly. So what have you seen about this so far?
I actually tweeted at Ilhan Omar earlier this week. She was making comments about Tucker Carlson, but the point I make is the same: that criticism is not racism, and just because someone of another race criticizes you does not make them a racist. And if you think it does, then you're probably the racist in this equation. Valid criticism is okay. And I think it speaks to the tactics of the far left, that they love to be victims. They love to be constantly assaulted and attacked. And so if a person of another race, particularly a white person, has anything to say to you that's in any way negative, it's now okay to call them a bigot and a racist, and it's ridiculous. That being said, I love to see the Democrats eat themselves. It's fantastic. Please keep going. I love it. Do it. Keep calling each other bigots and racists. Keep dividing yourselves. Keep pushing moderates away. The more moderates and independents and centrists that get turned off by you, that is only going to help us, whether they decide to vote Republican or they decide to just stay home. I'm fine with either one of those. And I am not a Republican, but I think the Democrats have shown they are completely incapable of running themselves. They're not going to be able to run this country. So right now, despite all the issues I have with the Republican platform, I think they're our best bet, and they are the way that everyone should be leaning for now. So I welcome it. Bring it on. Let them all just devolve into infighting. I think these four women have somehow taken over the party, and I think social media has a lot to do with it. I think Pelosi was right for calling them out on that, for saying, I don't care for Pelosi at all, but she made a really good point in some of her statements that these women exist in a Twitter bubble, and most of the people egging these women on don't live in their districts. A lot of the people in these districts are not happy with the way these women are performing. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be really interesting to see when re-election time comes. Are we going to see these same women still holding office? I'm not totally sure.
So you said in the beginning of your little rant there that you called Ilhan Omar out for the fact that she's calling other people racist. So you're saying that you are now blocked by Ilhan Omar.
For some reason, I've so far been able to escape being blocked by them, and now that we have this new ruling that solidified that Trump can't block anyone, and we've got AOC being sued for blocking people, I'm hoping that that's going to keep me under the radar. I've been very fortunate so far that the people that block me are usually Antifa or far left YouTubers that stumble onto my channel or my tweets or something. Politicians so far have been fairly, they just ignore me or don't know that I exist, and that's okay.
Now, you bring up these districts and what comes for election time, and that's an interesting topic. I wrote an article for Freedom Scoop not that long ago talking about the re-election efforts and the primary, or not the primary efforts, but the efforts to unseat these women from their districts. I have never been to New York State at all. I take that back. I've driven through the top of New York State when I drove to Boston, but I mean, I've never been to New York City. I've never been in Cortez's district. But I have been in Ilhan Omar's district. It's actually not that far from me. And I did some research on this, and no matter how badly they perform, these are very solidly blue districts. And I don't know that without a primary challenger, these women can get voted out. I really have a hard time believing that a Democrat plus 28 district in Minnesota is going to turn around and vote for the young woman that's planning to run as a Republican in that district. I don't see it happening there.
I think that's a really good point. It's true. And, going back to Pelosi again, I think she had made that comment, a glass of water with a D on it could win in our district. She was talking about herself as well. And I think that also speaks to, the one of the issues that I have with the left and that I used to be a part of is just this automatic Democratic voting. I really wish that we could get through to more people that the Democratic Party can be very destructive the way that it is right now. However you may have felt about it during Obama's presidency, it has changed drastically. And there seems to be, unfortunately, a lot of people on the left that don't want to admit that or that aren't prepared to admit that. And so they just continue to go in and vote straight D down the ticket. And it's unfortunate, not just for the country as a whole, but I think for them, for them as their mindset, their psychology, this idea of automatically falling in line with the herd. It's sad. And I would love to see more people wake up. I would love to see moderate Democrats really step up. I feel badly for them that they are being so pushed out of the party. And I would love to see more of them try to primary and see what happens. Maybe they don't get the nomination, but it'd be really interesting to see how many people do vote for them.
And I think some of these districts could turn red too, but it's not going to be just a one-on-one battle. It's like you said, you'd like to see primaries because these people might not get the nomination, but they are going to bring out some. They're going to keep the politicians honest as much as one can keep a politician honest.
Right. We got to remember AOC did not win by that much. She really won her primary because a lot of moderates stayed home. And it was directly because of her far left base that she was able to get that seat.
And then, of course, she called Crowley out for come debate me, come debate me, come debate me. And then when people like me or Shapiro or anybody else like that called her out and said, okay, well, now that you won the nomination, come and debate me, we're catcalling.
Yeah. or you're being racist or a bigot or a sexist or whatever.
Did you see the Freedom Tunes cartoon where Seamus made fun of that?
No.
Yeah, it was Cortez walked up to Ben Shapiro, but he was in a construction outfit, and he says, "Hey, Toots, why don't you come on and debate me?" I will get you a link for that after the show is over because it was really funny.
I love that. Yeah, I love Freedom Tunes. They're great.
Um, One of the interesting twists in this story that we've seen in the past week, and one of the reasons that I wanted to bring this up as well, both involve the president. The first twist is that Trump is actually coming to Nancy Pelosi's defense, saying that she's completely in the right, that she needs to take control of her party, and she is the one that's in charge and not these other people. So, and I think that's absolutely right. She was elected to be the speaker. I know a lot of Cortez's fans around the country wanted her to be the speaker, but Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, and she does need to keep her party in line. We'll talk a bit more about where her party is straying from her in the next a couple topics down. But I mean, yes, this is Nancy's party, and this is Nancy's house, and she needs to herd these people. And if they're not doing what they need to do, then she needs to make the campaign to get them out of there.
Yeah, I think one of the issues with Pelosi is that she's trying to walk this tightrope between moderates and leftists. And I don't believe that she's doing so successfully. I think she's given the far left way too much leeway. She has not spoken up enough in the past about their tactics. And so now that she's trying to, it's almost like if you use the analogy of a single parent who spent many years trying to be their child's best friend, letting them get away with anything, and then suddenly decides that they want to become a more disciplinarian figure, they're not going to be respected, they're not going to be listened to. And so I think we're seeing Pelosi really lose the reins on her party right now. And as I said before, I don't have a problem with that. As far as Trump defending Pelosi, part of me wonders if this isn't some of the 4D chess that often gets attributed to Trump. Very often when Trump praises someone, it creates the opposite reaction in the left. If Trump has something nice to say about you, then suddenly you become an enemy. And so I do kind of wonder, is this all a tactic? If him praising Pelosi, is that really just a way to get the far left base even further against her?
Yeah, and it's hard for me to tightrope walk around this because there's a lot of this that's going to be in a topic down the sheet here. But yeah, it is absolutely right. The base is turning against Nancy Pelosi, and they weren't all that thrilled with her being the Speaker of the House to begin with when they took control of the House again. So I love watching them eat each other.
I do too.
The last thing I want to touch on in this topic here, and we're running a little bit long here, but the last thing I want to touch here is yesterday, while I was finishing out this, I saw that Donald Trump was trending, and I realized when I looked at it that he was trending because he told the congresswomen to go back where they came from. Now, I read more into this, of course, as I always do, and I saw that, yes, he kind of did say to do that, but the reasoning behind what he said was the fact that these women are coming from very politically volatile regions and very violent regions as well. And they're running out of there with everything that they can hold in their hands and just letting these places fall down into despair. Meanwhile, trying to enact some of the policies that they were used to living under while they were in these regions and trying to turn the United States into the places that they fled. Did you see that tweet?
I did, and I think it was important. I think it was unfortunately worded in a way that got him labeled a racist and a bigot. However, I think he touched on something that a lot of Americans are thinking right now. Not just natural-born citizens, but legal immigrants. I think anyone who's proud to be a citizen of this country, whether they want to admit it openly or not, I think they feel the same way about these people, and not just these four women, but I see this more often directed at Antifa than any other group. But communists are rapidly trying to take this country over. And I think we see a lot of people feel this way. If you hate America so much, get the F out. if you don't like it here, leave. There's plenty of other places that you could go to that have programs or policies that you claim to believe in and support. So why don't you go there? America has always been a country founded on personal liberty and personal freedom. And so when we see these groups that are actively pushing back against that and slipping into authoritarianism, I think it's completely understandable that a lot of people are getting frustrated with that and are just wishing that they would go away.
Yeah, I understand that to an extent, and you're right, it was very unfortunately worded, but I mean, the other thing that you have to keep in mind with Trump when you talk about him is the fact that he can come out and say, I found a way to guarantee that every black person has a job that makes $75,000 a year, and he'd still be a racist.
Absolutely. And that's, the same with when I talked about wanting, a border wall. I am suddenly an Uncle Tom to my Hispanic race. For some reason, there's been a successful changing of narrative in this country that, wanting our laws to be enforced is somehow racist. And I think it's very calculated, and I think it has a bigger goal than I think we've all really been aware of. But I think people are starting to see it. And so I think Trump can say things often that get overinflated or get misunderstood, because I think people want to misunderstand him and, they want to misinterpret his words. But like I said, I think he struck on an important point of patriotism and what country are you serving? I think you made an excellent point of, we see a lot of people that are coming from countries that they are fleeing countries that they believe have failed them. And rather than coming here and adopting the programs that we have that have been very successful, for some inexplicable reason, they want to bring the things over that cause their country's downfall. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Well, you bring up the border wall and customs enforcement, so let's take some time, speaking of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and talk about the interview that she had while Acting Director Homan was sitting in front of the House of Representatives. A now viral video went around the Twitter sphere this past week in which Cortez was interviewing Director Homan, and you could tell right away that she was trying to make sure that she got her camera time and told him that he was causing the separation of families, and he kind of slapped her around to a point where I kind of wish I, at this point, figured out how to add videos to my production here so we could actually sit back and see it. But it was quite entertaining. The video will be linked in the description below. But did you get a chance to watch this one? It was about a 2-minute video that I saw.
I did. It was fantastic. And I think he made a point that a lot of people have made, and I'm so glad that he made it. This idea of family separation is ridiculous. The idea that the right or that independents who support ICE, that we are somehow racist or that we don't care about these children, when it's been shown, I believe, 30% of them are with adults that are not their family members. We have children that are being rented. We have children that are being stolen. There are parents in Mexico that are saying that their children have been kidnapped by caravans so that they can be taken and used to get over. And even the children that are coming over, a lot of them are getting put into sexual trafficking, slavery. And so this idea, this lie that we somehow don't care about these children, it's frustrating. And it's also what I loved, the point that Holman made was that, anyone that gets arrested is going to be separated from their children. Children do not come into detention with you. He made the point of someone being busted for drunk driving. If you're caught drunk driving and you've got your kids in your car, the kids don't get locked up with you. They usually will call CPS or they'll call a relative to come and get them. And so everyone who commits a crime is going to be separated from their children.
And to take that, I just want to take that a step further here. I hate to interrupt you, but
no,
it's the same thing too. I mean, you brought up drunk driving, and that's a very good point there, because that's not a catch and release crime either. You are going to be separated from your children, and you are going to go to jail. It's not like you got caught speeding, and yes, you're going to go home after you get the ticket, and then you're not going to be separated.
Yeah. Right. Any drunk driving. I think his other in a different, it might have been a different interview he was having with a different lawmaker, but he also brought up domestic violence.
No, that was the same one.
Was it the same one? Okay,
yeah.
Same thing. If you're caught, usually in a lot of states, when you're arrested for, because I used to work with social services for a little while, and was a liaison for CPS. And in a lot of states, when you come on to a domestic violence situation where both parties are injured, more often than not, both members are arrested. And so someone has to come and get the kids. They will more often than not try to find an immediate relative that can come and pick the kids up and take them with them. But if the police can't determine who's at fault in a domestic violence incident, you're both getting arrested. You're both going to jail until they can sort it out. So again, these are crimes that you are not allowed to walk away from and come back for a court hearing. We've also seen in the terms of immigration, a lot of these people aren't coming back for their hearing. So this whole catch and release idea hasn't been working for us. I wish that there were a better way. I wish that there were a more comfortable way for everyone. But the fact of the matter is the sheer volume of people coming over makes that impossible. We have to do something, because we cannot have 100,000 people a month, just pouring into our cities and our rural areas and completely wreaking havoc on our economy.
But seeking asylum is not a crime.
No, and this is actually, I'm really glad that you said that, because that was the only thing that I had an issue with what Homan said, was that he made the point that you should be coming in through a port of entry to seek asylum. And that is preferable, but it's also not technically true. The law states that anyone can claim asylum no matter how they entered. So the issue to me is more that we have a lot of people that are claiming asylum that don't need it, or that are, that are misrepresenting their situations to try to come in. And it actually hurts the people that actually do need asylum. We have, and no one wants to give Trump credit for this, but we have one of the most LGBT supportive presidents in our history. He's supported the LGBT community since before he ran. He supported gay marriage before he ran, and he's now trying to encourage countries all around the world to stop, having homosexuality be a crime. And so we have a lot of people. I hold the gay community closely in my heart, and we have a lot of people around the world that are being, murdered, beaten, just completely violated as people, because of their orientation. So that's one group alone that actually would, that we would want to protect, that we would want to help. And because there's so many people abusing the asylum process, there are, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of people that genuinely need help that aren't getting it.
That's an interesting point. I don't know what to think about that. I mean, I would prefer, of course, that anybody who comes into this country does come through the port of entry. That way we know who's coming in. We can put a record of that. We can get the people. Because if you do jump the border, yes, I do believe that you should be arrested for that. You should be separated from your family, because you don't want to have the kids in the same cells as the cartel members and the people who would try to take advantage of them for anything. But, if you came through the port of entry and saw asylum, I don't see any reason why you should be locked up, because you're trying to do everything the right way. If you're jumping the border, I can't see you trying to do everything else the right way once you do apply for asylum.
I would totally agree with you on that. I would prefer that everyone seeking asylum come in through a port of entry. There are hundreds of them across the country.
Mm.
You know, there's no reason why you shouldn't, other than, you know, that, and that would immediately make us start to suspect your motives if you're not willing to go through a port of entry. I personally would like to see immigration limited right now, legal immigration limited. I would like to see a rule that asylum can only be sought at a port of entry. I'd like to see that law changed. I, I think we need to do everything we can to try to deter the lure of this country. I think a lot of people are coming here for economic reasons, and that is not fair to everyone else. And more importantly, it's not fair to the country that they came from. You know, there are countries all over the world that are falling into third world status, that are falling apart, that would greatly benefit from intelligent, industrious people remaining and doing everything they can to create a better environment for themselves at home.
Yeah, every time I talk about the border, I always cite Razorfist's video on why we need the wall from right after the election, because that's exactly right. And what you're saying, that these countries will benefit from having the people there that are trying to come over here and be financially independent because they're over here. Mexico is due for a revolution. The cartel runs the government. I don't care how many free elections that they have. The cartel runs the government. Mexico is sitting on the biggest oil field in North America right now. They have no reason to be as poor as they are, but the porous border and the fact that people are jumping over and being caught and released and working in the United States, it does serve as a sort of a pressure relief valve.
Hmm. Yeah, I think Mexico and a lot of South America, but there are countries all over the world that are just teetering at the brink of either revolution or collapse. You know, we're seeing this happen in Venezuela right now. These places are not benefiting from our immigration system. They're floundering because of it. And so I think our representatives should be doing everything they can to try to stop that. We need to stop, allowing people that come here illegally to receive benefits. I believe that people who do come here legally should have a longer waiting period before they can receive benefits. I think that would do a great job in trying to dissuade some people from coming here.
That is a very important point to bring up, is the waiting period for benefits. And I think that's a part of the reason that we're trying to see a socialist revolution happen here, because these kids that are trying to turn our country into a socialist country, they always cite the free healthcare in Canada or Denmark or Norway or Sweden or several other European nations, especially in Northern Europe. And you always ask the question of, why don't they go there if they want the benefits? Why do they want to try and change our system rather than going to a place where the system is already in place, already has the bugs worked out, and already works? And from what I understand about Canada, you can't just go over, become a citizen of Canada. Well, you can't just go over and become a citizen of Canada to begin with, but you cannot just go over there and then start taking their free healthcare right away. I think if I remember correctly, there's a waiting period before you can start receiving benefits, because you have to start paying into the system before you can take it out. I believe the Nordic countries that they continually talk about are the exact same way. You have to start paying into the system before they'll start letting you use the benefits. So rather, they're trying to change this place, or our country, over into the same kind of a system, so they've already paid into the system.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm not sure about Europe, but yes, in Canada there is a waiting period, and I think in regards to Europe, I don't think that the socialists here are really understanding how much smaller the populations are in these European countries, and that they are taxed at a much higher rate than we are. So it's easier for them to have all of these social programs. It'd be very difficult to get taxes raised at the level that they are there here. And yeah, I'd really love to see a waiting period. I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, having worked for a few years with social services in my state, it was very liberally applied. There were people that had arrived that very same day that were getting signed up for Medicare, food stamps, income support, temporary cash assistance. They're immediately getting afforded these benefits and immediately becoming a burden on society. I support a merit-based immigration system. I don't mean to come across harshly, but I think for now, in order to save what we have, we really need to curb immigration across the board, both legal and illegal. We need to limit how many people are coming in. I personally, I would love to see asylum, genuine asylum only, and it must be done at a port of entry. And if you don't come in through a port of entry, you immediately lose your right to claim asylum. That's hard, and I don't want that forever. But I think, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, we need to do something drastic, because we are going to lose everything that makes America one of the greatest countries on earth.
Well, I mean, even Lenin knew that in order to implement Marxism in Russia, he was going to have I think he was supposed to be like a 5-year period of complete open markets to try and build up the capital, and the public said, no way, we want our Marxism now. You need to have that unrestricted market to build up the capital so you can start taking care of people rather, under a socialist system. But you also have to close the borders. That's the one thing that nobody thinks about, is the fact that they want to have this Marxist system, but Marxist systems don't work on an open border system.
No,
they don't work anyway, but
don't. Well, yeah, no, they don't work, but they definitely don't work if you have open borders. And my heart breaks for the hundreds of thousands of homeless people that we have in this country right now, many of them veterans, most of them men. And we have just a really serious problem with homelessness. And so it's that infuriates me even more when I see people on the left pushing for open borders, pushing for even more people to come in that are going to take away the resources that are desperately needed by current American citizens that are living in tents, on sidewalks. And to me, it would be a lot more beneficial to us to focus on those people first before we try to allow any more people in.
Well, I got a couple more topics here, but they're kind of quick hitters, so let's finish up the show here. One of the things that I wanted to touch on this week, and it's something that I saw while I was going through something else, and somebody had retweeted and shared, and of course then I had to retweet and share, and that's Pelosi's Twitter feed, because if you go to any single post in Nancy Pelosi's Twitter feed right now and go into the comments, which I highly recommend, you will find a full repository of people demanding that Pelosi start the impeachment investigation. Now, this has been going on for quite a while, but it's never been this bad. I mean, you go down and you find 75 comments in a row of all people telling Pelosi to start the impeachment proceedings in a post where she was talking about some sort of charitable event. And some of these are borderline ratio tweets. They're getting to the point where more people are commenting than they are liking what she's saying. Have you seen any of these so far?
I have, and it's frustrating, but also kind of laughable at the same time, because it's just another way for them to distract themselves. It's not going to happen. Trump is not going to be impeached. It's 2019. We've got one more year before he's up for re-election. It's not going to happen. And their biggest or best chance was, the emoluments clause that just recently got struck down in the Court of Appeals. So I think it's time to, let that what is it? Let that horse die. And they really need to be focusing. I think I think the Democrats are focusing so much on Trump because right now they do not have any policies that are actually going to be successful. They don't have anything they can actually market to their voters. You know, they have no real platform beyond open borders and Orange Man bad. And so they're going to ride that until they absolutely can't any longer. And it's only going to be detrimental to them. You know, it's only going to further drive away people that are thinking rationally. And it's only going to further rile up Trump's base. And it's a losing battle, and they need to let it go.
Well, I disagree with that entirely because I really want to see the House of Representatives, rather, open up an impeachment inquiry that's going to cost all kinds of money going into an election year. I want to see that.
That is a good point. I think, though, that would be the nail in the coffin for them. And so if they want to do that, then sure, go ahead. Like it said before, whatever you guys want to do to kill your party, you go right on ahead. I'm not going to stop you. But it's incredibly foolish. And when they spend all that money, that's our money. You know, that's taxpayer money. And in a perfect world, we could say, hey, every far left celebrity that's crowing for impeachment, you guys can foot the bill on that, and that would be great. Then go ahead, I support it. Mm-hmm. But I would not like. That's where I would disagree in that. You know, I wouldn't want to see our money get wasted on something like that because it would be a waste of money, and it would affect everybody. So you know, while it would be excellent theater, and while it would completely kill the Democrat Party, it would also hurt everybody in the process.
Yeah, you're right. It would kill the Democrat Party, and then we would come to a point where they would be able to reform.
They really need it. And, you know, I mentioned before feeling sad for Democrats, and I do feel sad for them. I feel sad for moderate Democrats and centrists who once identified with the left because they're at a loss right now. You know, they've been pushed out by their own party, and for whatever reasons, which is fine. You know, they don't support a Republican platform. That's, you know, I think if you have valid reasons for not supporting conservatives, that's great. You know, if you've done your homework, if you've done your research and you do not support those policies, fine. You know, and there's a lot that I don't support. But I feel very badly for the majority of Democrats right now because they do not have a party that represents them in any way. And it's really sad.
And there are a lot of people out there that, you know, with me, if they put JFK back up, I would probably vote for JFK. I've done a lot of research into that. Mm-hmm. But if JFK were resurrected and were to run for president again, he would have to run as a Republican.
Yeah. I've heard that, you know, I the other day, my husband and I were talking about, you know, when was the last really admirable Democrat in office? And we couldn't think past JFK. You know, everyone since then has their issues in some way. So absolutely, I would love to see another JFK step up. But he would have to run as an independent or a Republican. He'd be labeled a racist and a bigot by his own party. It's just they've gone so far off the rails that they need a complete, they need to be cleansed so badly. And I sadly I don't see that happening. And as a former Democrat, I would love to see them, you know, really reckon with themselves and completely, literally clean house and just, you know, completely reassess where they are and who they are as a party.
This is an interesting thought experiment, too, because you brought up the emoluments clause. What charges do you think the Democrats think they have against the president? I know I always see the border atrocities, but I want to see what they want to bring forward that they think that a Republican Senate is going to vote to confirm.
I don't think there is anything that a Republican Senate would confirm, you know, but they were really riding on the idea that, you know, Trump is somehow taking foreign bribes by allowing foreigners to stay at his hotels. that's not it's not going to work. And so I guess right now their best bet is going to be the border and is going to be the family separation. But then you have people that are logical, like Holman, pointing out that the alternative would be having more of these children put at risk by being, kept with adults that are going to hurt them. We've seen from ICE that many children report that they were assaulted on the way up, and that when they were kept with adults, they were assaulted in the detention centers. So they can keep trying to push this narrative, but I think that Republicans so far are doing a decent enough job of pushing back and showing that logically that just can't happen.
I still think it's going to be the Russians.
I think no, yeah, I think they're still writing that, which is just, and not. I think there's so much ignoring of facts going on. Like you mentioned before, I loved what you said before about not having a calendar. They completely do not want to admit that this happened on their watch. This is because of them. If this happened, if they did it, they allowed it to happen, and they may have even caused it to happen. And so they can continue to push that if they want to, but it's not going to go anywhere.
The last topic that I have here, going back to the Donald, is the fact that he made a campaign stop this past week, not too far from me, actually. It was only probably about an hour away from where I'm sitting right now. And he came in, he gave some speeches to union workers because Wisconsin is still very much in play right now. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But a lot of people, all that they could talk about, especially in state, was the fact that Paul Ryan got on record this past week and said that the reason he got out of government is the fact that Donald Trump didn't know anything about the government and couldn't govern effectively at all. Did you see some of that feud at all?
Yeah, I saw a little bit of it, and I think it really, I think it highlights the division we're seeing right now on the right between establishment politicians and people like Donald Trump. I think what made Trump so appealing was that he didn't know much about government. He knew how to run successful businesses, and he approached it as, I'm going to run the country like a business. And I think that resonated with a lot of people who are tired of the same old, same old. They're tired of establishment Republicans and conservatives. They're tired of conservatives that actually conserve nothing and bog us down with, regulations. And, it just, I think Trump touched a nerve that I think he continues to tap into. It's very calculated. It is expert, and I think he's going to win again in 2020. And I think it's because he is able to speak to the common American, and not just, wherever you're at economically, whether you're low income or high income. He's able to speak to people in a common way at a basic level that is easy for them to understand. And it's easy for them to hear what he's saying and process it and take what he's saying and research it. He often makes outlandish claims, and he says things that aren't necessarily accurate, but he also says things very plainly. And I think that people are desperate for that. We need politicians that are going to level with us and speak to us plainly. And Ryan is not that guy. And so I don't think anyone on the right is going to lose sleep over Ryan, and his comments. And I don't think, he's not important anymore.
You know what's really frustrating about what you just said? He used to be that guy.
He really did. When he first took over as Speaker of the House, people were, they loved him. They said he was going to be the next president. And he just, and I think Trump made the right point, is that, from his own actions and inactions, he lost the footing that he had, and nobody listens to him anymore. And it's interesting how that happened in just a few years. But Yeah, he used to be on top. He was the guy that everybody was looking at, and not anymore.
Well, I can even speak to that from further back from when he took over from the speakership. I've
Hmm.
lived in Paul Ryan's district for almost my entire adult life, with the exception of a couple of years when I lived in District 2. He used to be, even before he was the speaker, he was that guy. He wanted to be there, he wanted to listen, he could communicate that message. Being the speaker absolutely destroyed him. I can tell you that from experience. And just this whole incident that's happening right now, I have spent a lot of time defending Paul Ryan because I think he's a really good guy. I met him once when I was 20. Yeah, 20. I met him once then, and he was approachable. You could talk to him. He wasn't the politician that was sitting up on the high castle, and now he's starting to do this, and he's starting to become the politician that's sitting up on the high castle. And I hope to God he doesn't do anything locally. That was my that was something I was looking forward to when he first stepped down from the speakership and when he first stepped down from the House. But after this came out, and especially given the fact that he's doing this right before he has a book comes out, I hope he doesn't do anything locally because he's going to get eviscerated, and he's going to
Yeah,
deserve it.
yeah, and it's been a interesting fall from grace to witness, and I think you struck on an excellent point. He's got a book coming out, and I think it's going to be it's so the timing is very interesting and strategic, but it's also going to be interesting to see what happens with his sales.
Hmm.
Seeing how many people support him by how well that book does. That's going to be very telling.
I don't think it's going to be anybody that he used to represent, which is sad because, once again, before he was the speaker, he did a very good job of representing this district. I'm not sure how Brian Steyer is going to do now. He's way too green to be able to take a read off of, but Paul Ryan did a very good job. And that speaks again to Trump was here, and I wanted to touch on the battleground status of this state because, as a lot of people know, Hillary Clinton did not come here in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Something that we are very, very happy about in this state. I keep telling, when I hear a pundit say, oh, Hillary Clinton should have gone to Wisconsin. No, no. You keep saying that, and she's never going to leave here in 2020. She's going to move here. But Wisconsin went for the president in 2016. And then we thought that all was lost because we turned around and elected a Democrat governor. I still don't count the validity of that. I still think that there was something a little bit shady going afoot. But I also think that Scott Walker needed to go at that point. I thought that he should have won this term, but this should have been his last term, and he should have resigned after this term. But then we turned around just a couple months later and elected a Republican attorney general. This state is in play, is very much in play. It can go either way at this point. And I'm kind of excited to see that and be a part of the process. I talked a little bit in a solo video that I just did about a young woman who was showcased by the Washington Post who went to school in New Hampshire and tried to register to vote in New Hampshire and was told that she couldn't because she didn't meet residency requirements. Now, you don't pay any sales tax rather in New Hampshire. You pay a ton of property tax. You don't pay any sales tax or income tax in New Hampshire. So whatever she did in that state, she was not paying into the system at all. She was maybe helping the economy, but she wasn't paying anything into the government. And I think that it's reasonable for New Hampshire to come forward and say that, okay, you need to do this in order to participate in our government. But more closely, I'm interested in the fact that she wasn't registering in California, her home state. And the ACLU is involved, and I think a part of that is the fact that, okay, if you vote in California, that's just another Democrat ballot that's going on the pile. Where if you're voting in a state like Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota maybe, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, these are states where a couple or a handful of votes one way or the other are going to sway it one way or the other. It's going to change the thing. Walker lost by less than 3,000 votes.
Wow.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
I envy you because I've lived in blue states my whole life. I came from California. When I moved from California, it was Republican, but I was way too young to be political. But from there, I came to Virginia, which used to be a battleground state, but it's been completely taken over by the left that's in the northern Virginia area.
mm-hmm.
So they've been blue for quite some time. And I currently live in Maryland, which, despite us having a Republican governor, it is staunchly blue. Maryland even has gone so far as to pass red flag bill laws where the government can now basically come and take your guns away based on someone randomly calling and reporting you and saying they think you're unstable. So I really envy people that actually have a vote that's going to matter, because my vote is not. Being someone who's going to vote Republican, it is going to be a matter of principle only. It's not going to mean anything. It's not going to make a dent in any way. So I'm excitedly looking forward to states like yours, because you guys actually have, you actually have something to fight for. And I'm envious of that, because people like myself, in diehard blue states, it's a symbol. It's a symbolism sort of vote. It's meaningless.
I'm kind of excited too, because it's going to be an interesting one, and I think that this upcoming election is going to be a commentary on whether or not we still want to have the free market and have the hardworking Americans, or if we want to implement socialism. And I don't think America is ready for that yet.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting, and I hope very much that the majority of Americans that are right now talking about a rejection of socialism, I really hope they all show up. I hope that we are able to keep fighting for the things that make America so great, and to borrow Trump's slogan, this is a pivotal election, even more so than 2016 was. So it's going to be really interesting to see what plays out over the next year.
Well, before we go, I've got one last question, and that's all about you as well. Tell us something interesting that you do for a hobby, because politics is such a negative topic. We always like to see what the guests do to unwind and try and do something that's not political at all. So tell me something that you like to do that has nothing to do with politics or work.
I've talked about this on my channel. I love yoga. I have a major depressive disorder, and I do not use traditional medication for that. I manage it strictly through eating right, exercise, making sure I get enough sleep. So yoga's been a part of my life for 15 years now. And I recently, actually just last year, went and got my yoga teacher training certificate. So that was an amazing period for me studying that. I met some amazing people. And we're trying to keep this non-political, but unfortunately, being in the DC area, politics has invaded almost everything. I also love theater. I love the stage. I've been a stage actor for many years. I have taken a break from that. I haven't been on stage in about a year now, because it got so pervasive with leftist politics. Actors are traditionally liberal, but here particularly it got very divisive, and it felt off-putting, and it felt very exclusionary. So two things that I love, and when we move, because we're getting ready to leave DC, I'm very excited to get back into that wherever. I think we're probably going to go to West Virginia, and I can't wait to see what, the community theater environment is there. I imagine it won't be so political. So I'm looking forward to getting back into my hobbies, because right now my hobbies have sort of taken a back burner, just because politics is so pervasive here, and it's really sad. So I read a lot. I teach private yoga sessions to different people that are interested, and just try to focus on being healthy. I'm starting a family, and just trying to learn as much as I can about parenting, and we love to grow our own food, so we're also doing that. So trying to disconnect as much as possible, get off social media as much as possible, even though I'm on Twitter seemingly all day. But just trying to disconnect from the internet, as often as I can, reading physical books, taking a walk. That's what I've been focusing a lot more now in my free time.
And yeah, you said that you're starting a family, and I sat down last night and watched some of your latest videos. And 9 weeks, correct?
I'm 10 weeks right now. Yeah.
And congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank the audience for taking the time to come back and watch this, and welcome anybody who's coming in because they're following Vanessa here. If you'd like to finish the conversation of any of these topics with me, you can find me on Twitter. That is at edsblogtwitter with a 1 in place of the I. Or you can find me on email. That's edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. If you'd like to finish the conversation with Vanessa, why don't you tell us where they can find you?
Oh wow, I'm in a lot of places. I'm on YouTube, Twitter, BitChute, Minds, Gab, all at the same handle. Two Fingers Berben. That's with the number 2, and BERBEN. And I'm the most active on Twitter. So if you would like to reach out to me, that would be probably the best. I'm also very active in the comment sections of my videos. So if you go to my YouTube channel or my BitChute channel and you see a video that you like, I will respond. A lot of creators, aren't able to always do that, but I really make it a point to respond to all the comments. So even if you disagree with me, I love having debates. So definitely drop me a line there.
And that will all be linked in the description below. Once again, if you liked what you saw and you're watching this on YouTube or BitChute, and you're going down into that description to find all these wonderful places to find the guest, while you're on your way by, why don't you hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you're not already there. That helps us move up the charts and helps us get recognized. Once again, if you are listening to this on an audio platform, we are on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe over there. You'll get your alerts every week when this show gets released. And if you're on iTunes, leave us that 5-star rating and a good review and help us reach out to other people. If you like what you saw and you want to go over and see us and see some other great writing and some other shows, we are on the Freedom Scoop Media Group. Make sure you go over there and check that out. There are going to be some options there to help support some of our shows coming up in the near future. And we are still openly casting for writers over on Freedom Scoop. As the editor, if you'd like to contribute, send me an email and we'll go ahead, get you a sample article set up, and we'll see how your writing is, and I'll see if I can get you featured. Email me again. That's edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. As we always say on Ed's World, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Vanessa, you have last word.
Oh, just thank you so much for giving me an opportunity. I really love being able to talk to people about politics. It's not something that I can really do in real life here where I live, because it's so far on one side. So thank you so much for having me and just letting me be able to bounce these ideas off you. It was a really great time.
And thanks for coming by, and take care, everyone.